Behind the scenes of the film, Ed Wood and Harlan Ellison stands corrected. Next on Sci-Fi Buzz. This week on The Buzz, a century of women cartoonists have been overlooked and forgotten. But at long last, someone is giving them their due. The worst movie director of all time is finally getting his due in a major motion picture. Harlan Ellison answers his critics. Plus, the dinosaurs are back. But this time, they're headed right for your home.
Turn the light off!
It's Sci-Fi legend Bob Burns back there visiting Sci-Fi Central. I'm glad you're here too, because I'm eager to talk about one of the big films for the fall for sci-fi lovers, Ed Wood. It's Tim Burton's production. Johnny Depp stars as the flamboyant director. Talk about flamboyant people. Bob Burns, get out here. Come on.
Pardon me, guys.
Who's bothering whom here?
Well, I don't know. I mean,
good to see you.
I'll talk to you later.
Now, what I want to know about Ed Wood is why would people clamor to see this movie? Supposedly, Ed Wood was one of the worst directors that ever lived.
He was.
He was. He really was?
And also one of the nicest guys that ever lived, too.
But you knew him.
Yeah, and he had something about him, though. And if people just see this film is wonderful. It's a
You've
wonderful
seen it?
film. Yes, I have.
You like it?
I love it. I recommend it to anybody, especially fans, because it's got lots of stuff in there. They do a remake thing of Plan 9 and all this kind of stuff that they do, and it's just so much fun to watch.
That was perfect.
Perfect. Mr. Wood, do you know anything about the art of film production?
Well, I like to think so.
That cardboard headstone tipped over. This graveyard is obviously phony.
Nobody will ever notice that.
Ed Wood is a filmmaker whose time has finally come. The director of gems like Plan 9 from Outer Space and Bride of the Monster was once posthumously referred to as the worst director of all time. But now the man who fancied wearing pink Angora sweaters is reaping respect in a big screen bio of his life.
I think if you tacked on the name Fellini at the end of an Ed Wood film and showed it to somebody, they'd praise it as genius.
You want to keep moving. You've got to get through that door. And cut. Perfect. Print it. Let's move on.
Playing the title character in Ed Wood, Johnny Depp is once again pushing cinematic boundaries with his Edward Scissorhands director, Tim Burton. Depp believes those who see Wood as a wooden talent are way off the mark.
I think that given everything that he had available to him as far as money and props and locations and actors, I think he made some really interesting films. I think if you know, today they give a guy $100 million, you know, and a big muscle-bound guy with a submachine gun, and they say, go make a film, you know, and they do it, and it makes zillions at the box office. I think a 9-year-old kid could do that.
Yeah. What do you think Ed would do with $100 million?
Ed with $100 million, I think he'd take over the world. I think he would own us all, you know.
In real life, just as in the film, Ed Wood surrounded himself with a flamboyant cast of characters, many of whom made it into his movies, whether they liked it or not.
How do you do it? How do you get all your friends to get baptized just so you can make a monster movie?
It's not a monster movie. It's a supernatural thriller.
Martin Landau plays the washed-up horror legend Bela Lugosi. Ed Wood's relationship with Lugosi is a bizarre yet poignant part of this twisted Hollywood tale.
Tim said, you're my first and only choice for this role. I'm not seeing. I want to know if you will and can do this role. And I said, let's start with the makeup and see where it goes.
Gee, Mr. Lugosi, I've never had any complaints.
This is the most uncomfortable coffin I've ever been in.
Did you see his vision as well as he did? Did you say, oh yeah, I'm perfect for this?
Well, no. When I first read it, I said, oh, I love this. Yes, I'm perfect for this, but where do I begin? Where do we start? I saw a mountain that I had to climb to the top of. And first was makeup. And I didn't want it to look like makeup. And then Rick Baker, and we worked, you know, we worked all together. And I don't have a lot of makeup on, but enough. And I had to learn his face. I had to learn what muscles. Our faces are different. My eyes open up wide. My teeth show. His eyes close down. He has a black hole.
Mr. Lugosi, why are you buying a coffin?
I'm planning on dying soon.
Martin Landau. I can't imagine anybody else being better than that.
No, he's incredible. You know, I think he's just got such a breadth of experience and the highs and lows of everything that he really understood what the character was.
Director Tim Burton was taken with this unusual project the moment he laid his eyes on the script. Having mastered the art of making successful films like Beetlejuice and Batman, the quirky director was ready to take a stab at something a little less mainstream.
Part of what attracted me to it, and it helped me to refine my own you know, weird enthusiasm for things, because you know, it's like in Hollywood stuff, it's a very bizarre Alice in Wonderland kind of thing. You kind of get kind of beaten down by the whole thing, but it's great, and that's what I liked about all these characters. As much tragedy or whatever they're going through, they all just always just want to put on a show. You know, it's great.
We're about to embark on quite a journey. 4 days of hard work. But when it's over, we'll have a picture that'll entertain, enlighten, and maybe even move millions of people.
Why black and white?
In Hollywood, if you say you want to do a black and white movie, they immediately think you want to do sort of a pretentious art film. And, you know, we just thought it was the best way to present these characters and, you know, it's the simplest way.
A mass audience, do you worry about that? Do you care?
As long as there's a few people remaining in the theater by the end of the film, I'm, you know, if that one person is still there, I'm happy.
They're flying pretty well for the first time since 1958, right, Bob?
1958.
Now, these saucers were actually in
Plan 9 from Outer Space.
Directed by Ed Wood.
That's right.
Now, you suppose Ed went out and bought these?
Yeah, I heard he did. He went to a model shop, and there they were, and he got them. It's a Lindbergh flying saucer, the first type saucer ever made.
Yeah. Now, I know you like the film. What involvement did you have, I mean, technically?
Oh, I was sort of an unofficial observer, what you might say, something like that with Johnny Depp. He talked to me about Ed Wood's character and stuff, but he had him nailed so good. I thought I saw his ghost when I first walked in there.
Really?
Oh,
well,
so
one
good.
thing you mentioned, I think the people ought to know, too, that the movie doesn't make fun of Ed Wood at all.
No. I mean, there's a lot of fun in... Oh, you see, this thing crashed.
No one's injured.
There's a lot of fun in the film, but not at his expense at all. There's just a lot of very funny things happen.
Do you think Ed was an artist?
In his own way. Now, that leaves a lot of latitude.
Sure was. But you would agree he's a bad director. He was.
Oh, he was a terrible director. He was a terrible director. But an awful nice guy, and in his own way, yeah, you know.
Our very good director is saying, wrap this up, move on. So can you hang around the rest of the show?
I'll just hang right here.
This is Don from Fort Wayne, Indiana, and I'd like to explain to you the reason I've been up late. It's MicroPro's game XCOM, the Extraterrestrial Combat Unit. I highly recommend this computer game, and I'm sure you'll have many sleepless nights like I do.
This woman brings 100 years of female cartoonists out of the shadows and our Buzz Best Bets after this inspirational interlude. We've got some dynamite recommendations on this week's Buzz Best Bets.
You know what this is? It's a dinosaur egg.
Big news for all you dinosaur devotees. Jurassic Park, the top-grossing movie of all time, has at long last come to home video.
Go away!
It's okay, it's okay. It's a brachiosaur.
It's a Vegisaurus, Lex Vegisaurus.
It's been over a year since this tale of titanic reptiles first stampeded into theaters. Filmgoers around the world have shelled out more than $900 million to witness the cinematic wizardry that earned Jurassic Park 3 Academy Awards, including one for Best Visual Effects.
We have done what nobody has ever done before in motion picture history, or history for that matter. We have created a world of living dinosaurs.
You can curl up and cringe at the colossal creatures of Jurassic Park for $24.98.
You T-Rex?
Mm-hmm.
You said you've got a T-Rex?
Uh-huh.
Say again.
We have a T-Rex.
Not surprisingly, public interest in paleontology soared after Jurassic Park hit theaters. Riding the wave of this heightened fascination is a new book that focuses on the world's most famous dinosaur, Tyrannosaurus rex. The Complete T-Rex was written by dinosaur scientist John Horner and Dinosaur Society founder Don Lessem. As it turns out, some recent field discoveries have shed more light on the T-Rex than ever before. Among the topics explored in the book are how to find a T-Rex and lifestyles of the huge and famous. Buzz Best Bets.
LaDonna Davis, and I'm recommending The Initiate Brother and The Gatherer of Crowds, both by Sean Russell. These books are wonderful. There's love and intrigue, both of which are intricately woven with fantastic history and subtle philosophies rendered in verse. I really enjoyed these books and hope you will take out the time to enjoy them too.
Now, in August, we went down to the San Diego Comic-Con convention. We met a woman by the name of Trina Robbins, does some great work. What her work also reminds me of Scott McCloud's work. Remember when we met him a year ago at Comic-Con? He helped us understand comics, the invisible art. Well, now Trina's book helps us understand a century of women cartoonists. Enjoy.
Since at least 1947, comics has been considered enough of an art form for there to be books about it. But all the books have been written by guys. And you read these books, and like there either are no women mentioned at all, but or else maybe very quickly in passing there'll be 2 or 3 women mentioned, and that's the whole history of women, you know. So I decided to kind of make it my life's work, or at least like the work of the last 10 years.
Writer Trina Robbins has been on a one-woman crusade to bring attention to several generations of cartoonists. Her desire to tell the world about the women who played an important part in comic strip history was sparked when she discovered a simple fact.
I found so many women who have drawn comics and who were so good and who have been neglected. And I made my major discovery, and that is, if you're not written about, you're forgotten.
Robbins has been writing and drawing comics herself since the 60s, so she's no stranger to the art form. But she was overwhelmed by the daunting task of digging up the names of women whose work, for the most part, had been buried in the past. But after investing some serious time at San Francisco's Academy of Comic Book Art and getting several lucky breaks, her dream project started to take shape.
The earliest part of the century, the style was definitely cute kids. By the 20s, it was flappers. It's real easy for women to draw what is personal to them, and children and pretty girls are very personal to women. And of course, the 40s, which is one of my favorite periods, which is when I would say the majority of the men who were drawing comics in the 40s were draft age, and they all went off to fight the war. So the women filled their shoes just like they did in every other industry, and you had more women drawing comics in the 40s than at any other time.
In researching the book, Robbins found herself pursuing leads with a detective-like zeal. One of her most exhilarating discoveries was an entire family of female cartoonists. Then there was the time a woman wrote Robbins and asked if she could help her find out more about her late grandmother, Virginia Clark.
Virginia Clark, who had 2 names. Under one name, she had done these wonderful flapper cartoons in the 20s under the name Virginia Houget. Then, in the 40s, under the name Virginia Clark, and in a completely different style, she did a whole other strip called Oh, Diana. And no one until I found out knew that these were the same woman.
Robbins is currently writing The Little Mermaid comic books for Marvel. She's also developing a comic strip for National Geographic World. And while it might seem like she has quit thinking about her cartoonist comrades to pursue her own interests, the other women are never far from her thoughts.
I feel that I have indeed done what I've attempted to do, with the exception that it's very frustrating. I'm still finding more women cartoonists. And I don't know if I can possibly squeeze them into future editions. That's really up to my publisher whether he wants to completely redo the book, but I'm still finding them, and I don't know if I'll ever stop finding them.
After this disconnect, Harlan Ellison cleans up his act.
Maryland. I'd like to give my highest recommendations for 2 books that are being published by Dark Horse Comics under the Legend imprint. The first is Danger Unlimited. It's by writer-artist John Byrne, and it's an exciting action-adventure combining superheroes and science fiction. The second is Mike Mignola's Hellboy, a wonderful gothic tale with a great backup story by Art Adams entitled Monkey Man and O'Brien.
Our resident commentator on the passing scene is award-winning author Harlan Ellison. When we call him award-winning, that's an understatement. Harlan has won more awards for his 62 books, more than 1,700 stories, articles, essays, and columns than any other living fantasist. His current books are Minefields, Mephisto and Onyx, and I, Robot Screenplay, based on concepts by Isaac Asimov.
Over the last year and a half, through my various commentaries, I've made some errors. I've thrown some points out to be reposted by you all, and this is the cleanup. The first one comes from Professor James Gunn, the well-known author and editor and anthologist, who said, by the way, in the re-showing of your piece about awards shown Sunday, you may already have learned that Hugo Gernsback came from Luxembourg. I made an error. I said that it was Switzerland. Jim Gunn, thank you very much. Hugo Gernsback indeed came from Luxembourg. Matt Bodkin asked my opinion on popular writers or artists' work being continued after their death by others. I don't think an awful lot of it. I don't think that we need anybody else writing other Sherlock Holmes stories. Conan Doyle did very well by himself. I don't really think we need other people writing Raymond Chandler imitations. I don't think there's much to that kind of thing. I think it's grave robbing. I think collaboration is one thing, as done by Frederick Pohl and C.M. Kornbluth, but I think using the creations of other writers or artists after they're gone is digging them up and standing them up for people to grin at. That takes care of that one. Now, many of you had heard that there was an organization of pusillanimous, pustulant creatures who had formed an organization called Enemies of Ellison. That is true. They could not take me on alone, so they ganged up. They have been getting a lot of bad play as a result of this. And one of the things that has happened is that a group called Friends of Ellison has been formed. And you need not pay any money at all, as opposed to this other group that charges you $19 for scurrilous remarks about me. And all you have to do is send them an anecdote about something decent and kind I've done, and they will send you this wonderful handsome button. That takes care of that. Now, there were a couple of people who were objecting to my working on Babylon 5 because I had said that I wouldn't work on any show in which you heard the sound of spaceships zipping past or the sound of explosions in space, because that was bad science. Well, J. Michael Straczynski, Joe Straczynski, the producer, is a somewhat better scientist than I. He's not a very good one, but he's better than I. And so he appealed on the internet, those of you who have no lives and sit there all night long, punching around with the internet, and he got answers from all kinds of wonderful people, like Rick Tumlin and even Freeman Dyson, the inventor of the Dyson sphere. And they say such things as, sound is a term we use to ID a sensory report we gather through our tympanic system relating to a very narrow band of frequencies. Vibrations are gathered through the skin. Either way, it requires a medium, meaning like air, to be transmitted. I said, would you hear sound in space? The sound of a ship passing by would be silent at first. As the exhaust of the other ship begins to hit your ship, you would be very unlikely to hear any tones. That is, the hum of the other ship's engine would be lost due to the inability of the sparse gases of its exhaust to propagate sound. And it goes on. You would, however, hear wind. In fact, you would likely hear a faint sound of wind anytime you move. This was news to me. I thought space was silent. I thought there was nothing but bad science in these movies. Well, all of this was responses to Joe's request, would there be sound in space? And the last little piece that I wanted to read to you, because apparently you will be able to hear some things, and they have adjusted the sound on Babylon 5 accordingly to be scientifically accurate. Even a ship just passing by would create a disturbance in the plasma. If the ship was moving supersonically, which essentially means the same as it does in the atmosphere, although it's a little more complicated, it would also create a shock wave and a sonic boom. An ordinary microphone stuck out in space would pick up and translate a lot of these waves into sound. Now, that's Steve Smith from the High Altitude Observatory. So, I stand corrected. You would hear some sound in space, and I'm glad I'm working on Babylon 5, where there is a little sound in space. We have here on America Online any number of items that were sent along about my performance here, but there's somebody named, he calls himself the Mighty Mick. M-I-K, the Mighty Mick. I have no idea who this person is, but he calls me a Luddite because I have pointed out that there are a bunch of jamooks on the cybernet bulletin boards who sit around all night babbling at each other. And he says, it seems to be, who will drag Ellison kicking and screaming into the 21st century? Yo mama will drag me, Mr. Mick. That pretty much takes care of all of the things I had to take care of today. I've tugged my forelock about as much as I could. Send in your questions. I know the answer to everything except two things in the universe, as we all know. It's been my pleasure talking to you. Do come again next week.
is Mike Mandel of Chicago, Illinois. I'd like to recommend Peter David's book, Star Trek The Next Generation's Q Squared. Absolutely marvelous. Answers a lot of questions from the original Star Trek, even from the new one, and the book is worth it from cover to cover. Thanks.
Bob Burns, you special effects guys always have all the women around you. It's always been that way.
Well, we make them up.
Oh, these are creatures?
Sure.
This one I know is. We'll just wind her up again. Tell me, we're learning more and more about you by visiting your basement. You come on the show and tell us about people like Ed Wood that you actually knew. But tell me about your friends, science fiction, and special effects guys and women, when they come over to your house. Like on Halloween, what are you people going to do?
Well, like Dennis Murin, who just won his 7th Academy Award, I think. He was just one of the guys, one of the gang. A lot of the other people, Rick Baker, all these people just used to come over and we just to play in my backyard. And we did all kinds of stuff. And we did like the Alien. We had a 250-foot running like interior of the Nostromo. And you would walk in there and run into the alien and stuff. And one of the big guns from Fox came over and walked through and says, geez, we spent millions of dollars on our set. It doesn't look any better than this.
See, it's got to be so much fun over at your place. Can I come over to the Halloween party this year?
Sure. I could
Will all
use
these
you.
women be there too?
Most likely.
I heard you weren't really having those parties, though.
No, we had, well, when we built the museum on in the basement and all that stuff, we just don't have any room for them anymore. You know.
Well, squeeze us in this year.
I'll see what I can do.
little party.
I'll try.
And squeeze us in on Sci-Fi Buzz next Sunday. See you then.
Now, stay tuned for Masters of Fantasy, The Mind of Dean Koontz, next.